Seth Abramson at Seth Abramson Mueller Report live thread. This thread chronicles in real time the release of the Mueller Report with news and analysis from a Newsweek columnist and a New York Times bestselling author of Proof of Collusion. Please retweet this thread widely for those you think might benefit from it. 1. I want to start off by offering my Newsweek column from today, April 17th, which sets the stage for what the Thursday release of the Mueller will and will not be. Of course, in his opinion, the Mueller report is just the beginning. At 11:53 a.m., April 17th, Seth Abramson at Eastern Standard Time said, "Every great film needs a climactic moment, the thinking goes. So American media is positioning the release of the Mueller report, essentially just a summary of a case file believed to be hundreds of thousands or even millions of pages long, to be the single moment that either saves or damns the Trump presidency." Excuse me. News watchers shouldn't be fooled, however. The release of Mueller's summary of his nearly 2 years of investigative work, while an important milestone in the most complex and far-reaching federal criminal investigation of our lives, is merely a marker in time, a little different from many such markers that we've already seen and will see as the Trump-Russia story continues to unfold. If it's an ending, it's an ending to one of these historically harrowing stories, or at least chapters. That's all. When American media was en masse furiously predicting the exact date of the Mueller report release, getting its prediction wrong on at least 8 occasions dating back to the fall of 2017, it told its readers and viewers that Mueller was farming out a high percentage of his investigative leads to other jurisdictions. In 2017 and 2018, media took that fact merely as a sign that Mueller was almost done with his work, and not as we must see it in 2019 as a sign that Mueller was, farming out a high percentage of his investigative leads to other jurisdictions. In other words, what we read on Thursday, April 18th, when a heavily redacted version of the Mueller report will be released to the Congress and the public, will be nothing more than A, a brutally edited version of B, a summary of C, a massive case file that has itself, D, been largely sent elsewhere for investigation by other federal prosecutors. Anyone who thinks the Trump-Russia investigation can be, in a sense, summarized by a two-topic 300 or 400-page report that is missing a quarter of its pages has not been following the Trump-Russia story from the start. I've written 2 books on Trump-Russia collusion, Proof of Collusion, released at the end of 2018, and Proof of Conspiracy, forthcoming in August. And even in avoiding much discussion of Trump's obstruction and witness tampering in these books, as these actions were already known by most, by virtue of having occurred publicly, my research swelled to nearly 1,000 pages, because the books were written in a government report style, with most sentences containing a discrete block of evidence and footnoted to one or more major media citations. Those 1,000 pages were the most condensed version of the Trump-Russia story I could tell. So the notion that Mueller was going to tell in full the tale of Trump-Russia collusion in the half of a heavily redacted 300, 400-page summary, not focused on obstruction of justice, was always fanciful. Here, then, is the reality. Mueller's April 18th summary serves the primary purpose of passing on to the United States Congress the full archive of evidence on Trump's roughly 50 to 100 acts of obstruction of justice while president. With that archive useful to Congress in determining whether impeachment and proceedings are warranted, as most attorneys will tell you that just the public evidence of Trump's obstruction of justice is sufficient to support conviction for that offense, as obstruction of justice is an impeachable offense per the Republican Party or of the Clinton era. The answer to the question of whether Mueller's archive of evidence on obstruction is sufficient to support impeachment is an obvious yes. On the matter of collusion, Attorney General Barr has represented that Mueller only investigated a narrow legal issue within the broader question of whether the President of the United States committed acts of pre-election, transition period, or post-inauguration collusion, acts arising to the levels of a criminal offense and involving Russians, Saudis, Emiratis, Israelis, Egyptians, Qataris, or Bahranis. Whether Trump executed an implicit or explicit agreement with the Internet Research Agency, IRA, or Russian military intelligence GRU. Prior to these two entities' massive election season propaganda and hacking campaigns, respectively, no one in media or anywhere else has ever accused Trump of doing this, so we've always assumed the answer to the question Mueller investigated would be no. Frankly, that Mueller will need 100 or 200 pages to answer a question on which we previously thought there was no evidence at all tells us that Even if conspiracy couldn't be established beyond a reasonable doubt, as A.G. Barr has told us, there must be more evidence in support of the notion that we'd imagine. What Trump has long stood accused of, however, are crimes quite differently from conspiracy before the fact with the IRA and GRU. Specifically, the Trump-Russia timeline reveals that the president is susceptible to criminal liability for bribery, money laundering, illegal solicitation of foreign campaign donations, aiding and abetting computer crimes, RICO offenses, and involvement in any of the several crimes of fraud, including wire fraud, bank fraud, identity fraud, or the defrauding of the United States. All these offenses could be construed as collusive if they were committed, as the facts now and evidence suggest some of them may have been, in order to jointly benefit the Trumps and their allies and foreign nationals from any of the countries listed above. The offenses I've just enumerated are now being investigated, often using euphemistic language, such as being described as an investigation into the Trump inauguration by some combination of the following entities: the Southern District of New York, the Eastern District of New York, the Eastern District of Virginia, the U.S. Attorney's Office of D.C., the Central District of California, the offices of the Attorney Generals for New York, Maryland, New Jersey, and the District of Columbia, the FBI, the CIA, the District Attorney for New York City, various House committees, including Ways and Means, Financial Services, Judiciary, Oversight, and Intelligence, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the Special Counsel's Office, which still has a grand jury seated that it says continues to work robustly and whose former staffers have been sent elsewhere to prosecute cases like the one against Roger Stone set for trial this fall, and at least one unnamed jurisdiction in which Trump's former deputy campaign manager, Rick Gates, will be testifying. We also know that evidence Mueller compiled is being used in several completed investigations about to go to trial, including a case against Bijan Kian that Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, will be testifying in this summer. Any or all of these investigations could lead to new indictments and or new revelations, perhaps through the emergence of new cooperating witnesses that in time could lead to further new investigations and indictments. And of course, the fact that the Southern District of New York has already named Trump an unindicted co-conspirator in felony campaign crimes, meaning that he would be under indictment and on bail or in pretrial detention this very moment, were he not president, cannot be forgotten. All of the crimes being investigated by the entities above are potentially impeachable offenses, with at least one, bribery, being specifically enumerated in the United States Constitution as an impeachable offense. Virtually all of the offenses, including the felony campaign crimes we already know Trump has been accused of by federal prosecutors, are more serious than the offenses that Republicans impeached President Bill Clinton for not long ago. In short, the Mueller report will be interesting for what it tells us about the evidence Congress will be considering in determining whether to impeach Donald J. Trump for obstruction of justice. It will be interesting for what it tells us about the evidence of a before-the-fact Trump IRA and Trump GRU conspiracy that heretofore we had no idea even arguably existed. And it'll be interesting for what it doesn't say, the unnecessary grand jury redactions which A.G. Barr could have avoided with simple pro forma motions to several federal courts. The counterintelligence information tells us whether the president is compromised by foreign power, but which we will not be allowed to see or even guess at. The reputation evidence that Barr has elided to avoid embarrassing people whose actions and observations may well have told us much about whether Trump is fit to be president or is instead a corrupt politician, no different from those who derided and running for office in 2016. And the evidence of other ongoing federal investigations, a category of information that, as I've indicated here, is so vast that it could swallow the utility of the Mueller report altogether. If Americans keep all the foregoing in mind in reading the Mueller report and in listening to coverage of the Mueller report online and on television and in print, we will maintain a reasonable sense of how significant the report actually is in the grand scheme of the Trump-Russia story. If we don't, we'll be fooled into thinking a movie, still in its first act, has actually reached a conclusion. Seth Abramson is Associate Professor of Communication Arts and Sciences at the University of New Hampshire and author of Proof of Collusion, Simon & Schuster, 2018, on Twitter at Seth Abramson. Okay. 2. I've also detailed errors made by media in the run-up to the release of the Mueller report. If you read the Newsweek, there's an ant on my screen. If you read the Newsweek piece atop this thread and then the thread below, you'll get a sense of what an accurate account of events is up against right now. Well, geez. Yeah, this is the Okay, this thread is media misreporting of the Mueller report is the lead up to its release has reached a fever pitch. It could change the course of U.S. history by misstating the report's significance. Please retweet widely this explanation of the 5 gravest errors U.S. media is making. 1. Error. The media says the obstruction part of the report is what really matters, and the part Trump and his allies was worried about. Reality, the part of the report on obstruction is of limited significance. The focus of media attention should be the rest of the report. 2. Explanation. We already know the obstruction portion of the report is largely based on public records and events, meaning most Americans who care about the report at all are already familiar with the broad strokes of the obstruction case. But the problem is bigger than that. 3. Most attorneys of repute have said that even the public evidence of obstruction would be enough to lead the prosecution and conviction of a non-president. So while the report could add even more damning evidence to already damning stock material, we're already there. 4. The obstruction issue, which Mueller has paved on to Congress for consideration for impeachment, and which 2 irrelevant parties for these purposes, Barr and Rosenstein, have opined on to no consequence whatsoever, was always going to be a political calculation by Democrats. 5. Democrats must decide if they want to abide by the rule of law, which says obstruction is an impeachable offense, that Trump committed it, and that impeachment is merely an indictment on the obstruction issue so that it can be litigated in the Senate, or the rule of politics. 6. By wrongly stating that the focus of coverage for the Mueller report should be the obstruction issue, media has given Trump and his team a chance to prepare in advance for coverage of the report, and we already know more or less what the report will say on that issue. 7. It's for the reason that we're getting all these articles saying that Trump's team is merely worried about being embarrassed by additional information in the report on obstruction. They don't have to prepare for anything devastating because the media is focused on old news. 8. By comparison, as no one in the media ever accused Trump of executing a pre-hacking or pre-propaganda agreement, a conspiracy with Russian military intelligence, GRU, or the Internet Research Agency, respectively, the idea that Mueller found any evidence of that is stunning. 9. If AG Barr had said Mueller found no evidence, only a scintilla of evidence, or even probable cause, but no more, on the possibility Trump conspired with the IRA or GRU, that'd be one thing. Instead, he said Mueller simply couldn't establish it beyond a reasonable doubt. 10. So now you have Barr saying Mueller couldn't establish beyond a reasonable doubt a narrow and unlikely form of collusion that, in fact, neither the media nor average Americans ever really thought occurred. That means the real surprises may well come in that part of the report. 11. Error. Media is telling us it's what's the report that matters. Reality is absolutely without question what's not in the report that's going to matter. Almost nothing Americans really want or need to hear about is going to be in the report itself. Explanation. As I've noted, the obstruction part of the report will be largely public records and events, plus maybe some surprises that make an already slammed down case on obstruction, which Democrats will bring or not for political reasons only. Even stronger, that's yawn. 13. Meanwhile, the conspiracy part of the report will, per Barr, deal with a narrow and unlikely investigative thread that's not only the barest portion of the collusion issue, but not the thread anyone in media has followed or invested in. Any news series is just a cherry on top. 14. Here's what reporters have told you. The nation can, does, and indeed must have a very different standard for impeachment than just whether a crime was committed. Impeaching a president for a felony, which we already know per the SCNY Trump committed, is the easy case. 15. Far more importantly and far more relevant to our present situation, as Democrats have already indicated that even though we know Trump committed felonies, they won't move to impeach him for it, is the fact that a president can be impeached for national security reasons. 16. If there's a real possibility a president has been compromised by a foreign power, whether you set the possibility at a 25% likelihood, 51% likelihood, or 70% likelihood, that president must be impeached for the nation's safety. That's not a criminal standard law proof. That's not a criminal law standard of proof. 17. We know that the FBI and CIA have been conducting counterintelligence investigations into the question of whether Trump had been compromised by Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Israel, Egypt, or others, and may well still be engaged in those counterintelligence investigations. 18. If the result of these investigations is a real possibility Trump has been compromised by blackmail, disloyalty, tradecraft, venality, or by some other means, the Democrats must move to protect the nation, but Barr is keeping all counterintelligence intel from us in Congress. 19. By the same token, there are 20 pending federal and state criminal investigations looking into various felonies that would be impeachable offenses, many of them undergirded by collusive acts, and Barr has removed from the report any evidence from these ongoing cases. 20. So media tells us to focus on the SCO report when the sizzle is in the SDNY, EDNY, EDVA, CDCA, NYAG, NJAG, DCAG, MDAG, FBI, CIA, SSCI, NYCDA, and House committees, Ways and Means, Financial Services, Oversight, Judiciary, Intelligence. Some of these have multiple pending cases. Yeah. Yeah, if you count the SCO report, that's 13 acronyms. And then 5 House committees. Error. Media is treating Thursday's report as the end of Mueller's portion of the Trump-Russia story. Reality, the publication of the heavily redacted Mueller report is the beginning and perhaps the longest stage in all of the 2-year-plus saga of the Trump-Russia scandal. 22, explanation. The special counsel's office isn't even done with its work yet. It is sent its staff to other offices to prosecute certain cases or oversee its witnesses' participation in other cases, like the Roger Stone case this fall or the Bijan Kian case this July. But even beyond that, the SCO just told a federal judge that its grand jury was still seated and was doing robust work, a statement that's never been claimed but would seem to suggest that, report notwithstanding, the SCO may not be done issuing indictments after all. 24, not only can a sitting grand jury hear new witnesses and issue new indictments, and only can pending cases lead to surprising revelations, but new cooperating witnesses could emerge from such cases or grand jury queries that would charge dramatically the SCO's report. 25, then there's the fact that Mueller's evidence is fueling many of the 20 pending federal and state investigations of Trump, his family, his aides, his allies, his advisors, and his associates, meaning that the lawyers' names have changed, but not the legal work product. Trump, family, aides, allies, advisors, associates. 26, beyond this, there's the fact that Congress will go to court almost immediately after the release of the Mueller report to make sure that it gets the full unredacted version of it, meaning the bare bones copy we get Thursday is just an opening sally in months of litigation. 27, once Congress gets the full unredacted Mueller report, it will then use the evidence that Mueller found to determine if there are new investigative leads that it needs to follow up on with new subpoenas for testimony and documents. I can bet that will happen. 28, on top of all that, the members of Congress will begin Thursday seek to access the entire Mueller case file, which is rumored to be over 1 million pages, to determine if there's any investigative threat that Mueller says was beyond his purview, but isn't beyond theirs. 29, lest you think that some sort of partisan act on Congress's part realized that it was in fact anticipated from the jump, Mueller had a certain brief. He accumulated some evidence outside his brief. Congress's oversight role was always going to fill in and pursue those gaps. 30. So in fact, there's not a single element of the Trump-Russia timeline or investigative history that's going to end on Thursday, as all existing elements will either transform, be expanded upon, be the site of new litigation, or in some other way blossom into new event horizons. 31, error. By the way, they're writing stories about the release of the Mueller report, including inside the Beltway puff pieces on how White House staffers are handling the pressure of its impending release. Media tells you to care about internal White House drama. Reality, don't. Explanation. The White House, low-level staffers, mid-upper tier officials, Trump's legal team, members of Trump's inner circle, inside the building and out, know this is a long-haul fight. I want you to behave falsely, that they see this as a climactic moment. They don't. 33. In fact, many Trump insiders likely believe that Democratic leadership is going to shoot for getting not one but 2 bites at the apple in terms of kicking Trump to the curb. First, an election. Second, impeachment, with likely a better Senate if Trump somehow gets reelected. 34. In other words, people in the know on both sides of the aisle are treating Thursday as one of the many, many milestones. It's only the media who seek to get you, the American voter, to see this as a major event, and that's because they want your eyeballs on their screens. 35. Will Thursday be exciting? Sure, but there's little evidence that it will move the ball much in the larger Trump-Russia narrative. See everything I've said so far, and every reason to think that it's merely another in a long parade of somewhat consequential inflection points. 36. Error. Media frames the issue that imperils Trump's presidency as Russian interference in the election and whether Trump was involved in it at all. Reality, we already know most of what we're going to know about Russian election interference. That's not the issue anymore. 37, explanation. The question, frankly, since January 2017, when our intelligence agencies published a long report on what the Russians did and why and when, has been whether Trump sold U.S. foreign policy toward Russia and other nations for personal profit and election assistance. 38, no one has accused Trump of knowing of Russia hacking on propaganda in advance of them being initiated. Of course, it's a possibility. The question is if he induced continued crimes, in part because he knew he was receiving election aid and in part due to his venality. 39, the sort of crimes that those accusations would show up as do not seem to be part of the Mueller report, even though, and here's where American media really confuses us, some of the Mueller report, some of the evidence Mueller compiled would also be relevant to those very different accusations. 40, there are men like Elliot Brady, George Nader, Joel Zamel, Tom Barrack, MBS, Dmitry Rybolovlev, MBZ, George Birnbaum, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who are critical to the collusive acts that could bring Trump down, but who may not be in Mueller's report. Yep. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I said 10 names. Conclusion, Thursday will not be exciting, but it is decidedly unclear whether it will be consequential. Do not let the media's excitement over high ratings or simply its own confusion about whether Thursday matters, and if so, why, to cause you to overestimate its importance. End. Note, A.G. Barr is a political actor. He appears to be synchronizing his rhetoric, terminology, and document production with Trump and his legal team. So there remains a possibility he has misled us about what Mueller will focus on in his report. I acknowledge that possibility. Three, and now the biggest pre-report news so far, the NYT is reporting that Justice Department officials have secretly been working with Trump's White House to aid the White House response to the Mueller report, even though Trump was the target of the DOJ probe. That report now frames two other stories. Barr will hold a presser at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. The reporters can read the report or to give his gloss on it. His last gloss was political. 2, Pompeo, Trump's right-hand man, was seen leaving DOJ right before the Barr announcement. 5, what are you already seen, therefore, more than 12 hours before the release of the Mueller report, is a concerted White House pushback with the aid of the DOJ at the highest levels to frame how the public receives the report before even a single civilian has read any of it. 6, this DOJ White House acts is even more troubling given that the AG has, by all accounts, redacted the Mueller report to within an inch of its life, using 4 redacting categories, 2 of which grand jury testimony and derogatory info he could have navigated without redaction. 7, we don't have any sense whether the key issue we need answered, whether the President of the United States is a national security threat by virtue of being compromised by a foreign power, will be resolved by Mueller's work, or if the FBI, CIA counter-intel probes are even over. 8, it's the fact that makes the signs are already seen from DOJ nefarious, and as it's DOJ that's been redacting critical counterintelligence info from reports that it will now gloss, apparently in cahoots with the very White House it was investigating before anyone has read it. 9, as Natasha Bertrand notes, Mueller's absence at tomorrow's DOJ presser is telling. If he'd been kept apprised of how Barr was handling his work, you'd expect him to be there. Equally concerning is Barr's evasive testimony on his coordination with Trump. 10, Jerry Nadler, chair of the House Judiciary Committee and the man most responsible for initiating impeachment proceedings in the U.S. Congress, has just issued a brief statement on the DOJ and White House orchestrated outrages we've seen already tonight. 11, an update now on precisely who will be attending the 9:30 a.m. pre-release presser tomorrow. No one from Mueller's team. It's not clear that the team spokesman Carr can or should be counted, given that he is appearing in a different role as DOJ. 12, so far, every part of the report's release has been devastatingly badly handled by AG Barr, with all of it reeking of the worst sort of pro-Trump partisanship. This doesn't bode well for tomorrow or for America. We need a bipartisan, responsible report release. 13, it's no coincidence Republicans have timed the pushback on the FBI and FBI partners to coincide with the release of, again, a heavily redacted Mueller report. Upshot, there's a line in this report the Republicans must not want all of us to focus on. 14. My sense is Republicans have been publicly shouting no collusion, but privately preparing for a devastating report for months. The hive of activity we're seeing in GOP always distracting views confirms that it's always thought this was worse than it was pretending. 15 confirmed. 11 a.m. tomorrow is the time of the report's release. That'll give Barr 90 minutes to misrepresent the report's conclusions before anyone reads even the first word of it. This has all been orchestrated beautifully by Trump and Barr, I must say. 16. Update. DOJ now says it will allow certain lawmakers to view the report without certain redactions at some uncertain future date. Sounds generous until you realize Congress is entitled to the full unredacted report and will go to court to get it. 17. AJ Barr has created chaos pre-release, an enormous boon to Trump. 18. Breaking. CNN told Congress will receive discs with the report. 19. This aid is most of America right now. Yeah, he's tweeting Kyle Griffin, who says a Democratic Senate aide told NBC News. Here's the question. Why are they trying so hard to control the narrative? What are they trying to hide? 20. Lest anyone reading this think that I'm the only one deeply, deeply concerned about how American media has conducted itself and has allowed itself to be handled by the Trump administration since the release of the first Barr letter in late March. Well, go to lawfareblog.com. There's a memo to the president how not to screw up on the Mueller report. I'm going to stop right here for now. I need to go to bed.